Hello everybody. I'd like to talk to you today about Parshat Korach. Parshat Korach has a really frightening story. A story of machlochet, a story of argument. Korach and the people that went with him, his family, his supporters, they all decided to challenge the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. Who says that only you can be the leader? We want to be the leaders too. And because of that machlochet, we see that there was a terrible tragedy, and all those people that were involved in the machlochet, in the argument, were killed in a terrible way. They were swallowed up by the earth. Machlochet is a terrible thing. It can destroy everything. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi tells us that in the generation of David, there were many tzaddikim, but there were people that were talking behind other people's backs. There was machlochet. And because of that, when they went to war, they lost. On the other hand, says the Gemara, in the generation of Achav, where they weren't good people, they were worshipping idols, but they weren't speaking behind other people's backs. There wasn't that machlochet. And because of that, when they went to war, they'd win, even though they were idol worshippers. The Satan lives where there's machlochet. Where there's not machlochet, he's got no place. The Gemara in Gittin tells a story of two people that were living together, and all the time they were arguing. Every Erev Shabbos, they used to have arguments. And says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir went to stay with them, and he stayed there for 3 days until he managed to solve all their arguments. And once he did that, the Satan was heard to say, "Oi, the Rabbi Meir that has thrown me out of their house. By settling the machlochet, I've got no more place to live. I can't stay in their house anymore." And especially the machlochet was on Erev Shabbat. Erev Shabbat is a time when it's very easy for people to get involved in a machlochet. Shabbat is a time of shalom, shalva. So the Satan is doing everything he can to disturb that. But there are two types of machlochet. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Kol machlochet zehu l'shem shamayim. If you have a machlochet, you have an argument that is l'shem shamayim, it's for the praise of Hashem. You're not arguing to prove that you're right. You're arguing to get to the truth. Kol machlochet shu l'shem shamayim, sofo litkayem. That argument will carry on. Bekol machlochet shu lo l'shem shamayim, ein sofo litkayem. It won't last. It won't last in history. What's an example of a machlochet that was l'shem shamayim, says the Mishnah? The arguments of Shammai and Hillel. We know that there were two great yeshivot, the yeshiva of Shammai and the yeshiva of Hillel. And they didn't agree on many things in halakha, and they used to argue about it very much. But that machlochet was a machlochet l'shem shamayim. It wasn't Hillel or Shammai trying to prove that they're the best, or that they know better than the other guy. That wasn't the machlochet. The machlochet was to get to the truth. Whereas in the machlochet of korach, that's an example of a machlochet that was not l'shem shamayim. The Yalkut tells us that Korach wasn't prepared to listen to any arguments that Moshe might present. He didn't want to hear anything, because maybe he would be convinced. He was afraid of being convinced and shown that he was wrong. And so he wouldn't listen to the other side. That's the machlochet of Korach. That's a bad machlochet. That's the machlochet that is not l'shem shamayim, when each person has already decided that he's right, and he's not prepared to listen to the other side. But where each side is prepared to listen to the arguments of the other side. And if the other side convinces them, then they may even change their opinion. That is a machlokus that is the Shem Shamayim. That is a machlokus without any bias. The bias is, in a machlokus, the bias in an argument is you want to prove that you're right. But if you hear both sides of an argument and you're prepared to really concentrate and think and try and get to the truth, then you'll get to the truth. We're told in the halachot of a Beit Din, a Dayan is not allowed to hear the opinion of, or the claims of one of the two Baalei Dinim, one of the two people that are coming to Beit Din, if the other guy isn't present. Why? Because when he hears just one side of the argument, that will go into his head and it'll affect him. And it might be more difficult for him to hear the other side later on. Only when both sides are in front of him can he hear the arguments of both sides and decide and get to the truth. I always remember one of the first cases that I heard when I was in Beit Din. One side of the argument was someone who was very ill, in a very difficult situation, in a wheelchair. And immediately I felt my mercy on this person. Wow, how can anyone do anything nasty to this poor guy? But after we'd heard the other side, it turned out that the first guy in the wheelchair was completely wrong. And I was shocked to see by myself how much I'd been influenced in this argument by what I'd seen before the argument started. In any argument, in any discussion, if you're prepared to listen to both sides and you're prepared to concentrate and think and analyze to get to the truth, Hashem will always help you to get to the truth. The Rambam even has a proof for this. One of the Tariag mitzvot, one of the 613 mitzvot, is for us to all believe in Hashem. So that means that when a 13-year-old boy, when a boy gets to the age of 13 and a girl to the age of 12 and they become obligated in mitzvot, from that moment they have to believe in Hashem. They have a mitzvah of believing in Hashem. How is it possible to obligate a 13-year-old boy to believe in Hashem when there are so many very intelligent people that don't believe in Hashem? The answer is that really it's very simple to believe in Hashem if you put all your bias aside. If you look at the argument, look at both sides to any argument, you have, every person has the ability to get to the truth. If they didn't, then Hashem wouldn't put this 13-year-old in the position that he has to make a decision and believe in Hashem. Because we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't put any person in a situation that they can't stand up to. And so if Hashem is making this 13-year-old decide and believe that Hashem created the world, it must be that it's possible for him to do so. Even though there's so many different opinions around, even though in school, from first grade, he was taught about evolution. Nevertheless, it must be that there's an innate sense that a person can get to the truth if he listens to both sides to an argument and makes an analysis and comes to a final decision without being biased in any way, putting all his biases to the side. We all have that ability. And that's the difference between our two machlokuses. There's a machlokus where you listen to the other person. That's the machlokus of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. That's the machlokus that there is in a Beis HaMedrash, where everyone is trying to understand the sugya and listening to the arguments of the other side and analyzing them. And then there's an argument that is not the Shem Shamayim. That's where you just want to prove that you're right. That was the argument of Korach, and we see what came out of that machlokus. B'ezrat Hashem, may we all get rid of all machlokus and live in peace one with the other. Thank you.